And good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Joe at Jonah Cigars, and I am very excited to sit down with Alec Cuevas of Cuevas Cigars. I have already lit up his new blend, the Sangre Nueva, which translates into new blood. He is, after all, a fifth-generation cigar blender in his family. I'm very excited to welcome Alec. Thank you very much for joining us today, and welcome to the Jonah Cigar Channel.
Thank you for having me, Joe. I'm really excited.
For sure. So, TPE was just a few weeks ago. Tell us a little bit how the trade show went down. Were there any takeaways from that really struck you and left an impression on you that you would like to talk about?
Wow. So there are a couple things that do come to mind. I think one of the more prominent ones was that, from what I've heard anyway, at least from the people walking the show floor, this TPE and compared to last TPE had much more traction. So I heard I think it was a 30% growth in terms of the cigar industry side of things.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, which is that's an astute number. I mean, that's incredible. But that alone, it's always good to see familiar faces. For this year, we didn't want to rush anything in particular with launch in terms of a new blend or nothing. What we particularly launched in relation to that, instead of a new blend, was instead a 5-pack Toro sampler, which carries essentially our core line product. So you'll find our Casa Cuevas Connecticut in there, our Habano and our Maduro, as well as our Reserva line, which is our grandfathered product. Little story behind that, came out essentially 2019 for us. So that's really something new, really one of the newer things that we have out that we did launch during TPE. But beyond that, brother, I mean, it was just a tremendous show. I mean, it always is.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about the new blend, Sangre Nueva. Means new blood. Obviously, it's a reference to you kind of getting into the fray, cutting your teeth in the cigar blending world. Talk a little bit about how this blend came to be and how it became. What was it about this brainchild of yours that you were trying to achieve with this blend?
So I'm gonna try to do my best to give somewhat of a Reader's Digest when it comes to the story. Initially, what would happen was similar to what we're doing right now. We'd hop onto a lot of podcasts, and this ongoing joke would always come about between the interviewer in particular, who would always essentially tell me, listen, you've had your fair share of blending that you've tried in terms of the Mandaria, that you've done in terms of the Patrimonio. You've tried a plethora of cigars, and you're so young. You're a young buck. You're a young blood, and this name would stick with me for all of, I want to say it's been about 3 years now, 4 years, including this one. It became just an industry thing for me where every time I'd walk into the shop, that was just the title. And beyond that, and the people joking around saying you should come out with your own blends, which I really did take as almost like a tongue-in-cheek sort of thing, because I've always operated off the notion that it's me and my father, my grandfather, all doing it together. I'm finally having a conversation with my dad after one of these podcasts. Right. And we sit down and he essentially says, you know what, why don't you? You have an incredible palate. You've smoked a hell of a lot more cigars than I have. Why not dive a little bit deeper into the factory roots, so to speak, and see what you can come up with? Which to me essentially said, no pressure, but there's a hell of a lot of pressure to come with that, specifically from my father and grandfather. I consider them to be mentors to a T, and that kind of kick-started the entire process. I've always been a sucker for Cameroon. Always. I've always loved that Cameroon root. Its elegance, it's incredible, and it offers just a lot of very, very rich notes. So that being said, how did we get our hands on it? And that was the harder part. African Cameroon at that point in time was very expensive and very inconsistent. So because of which we ended up sticking with Ecuadorian Cameroon and playing around with the first blends, the first 4 in particular. Blend number 3 really stood out to me, and that was the one that carried just a little bit of Pennsylvania broadleaf, as well as a local Honduran binder in particular. Now, during this process, we weren't allowed to go back to the factory. COVID was still essentially going full throttle over there, so there was a lot of regulations to be had, and the last thing we needed was to be trapped over there. So what my grandfather would do to kind of circumvent this was he'd bring all the blends essentially into Miami, stay for 2 days. We'd all smoke them together, give our consensus, and then thus we'd write down on the listing as to what was good, what wasn't, and he'd take that back with him. So this process, to be completely honest with you, Joe, took about 8 months or so to really get the blend down right. However, during this entire process, I kept on coming back to number 3 and realizing that I was so stuck on this particular blend. It dawned on me. I was like, well, what else can we really add to this? I feel as if it's missing something, just an extra little oomph in terms of a component, a nice little layer of complexity that it just lacks. And I didn't quite know where to go about it. And I remember at this moment in time, my grandfather says, listen, we have a lot of unused tobacco currently sitting within the factory that we use for other individuals. If you'd like to test your waters and get some experimental blends out here, we definitely can. And I asked him for that full listing. On that listing was, interestingly enough, Kentucky Fire Cured, something that we did back for Sam Lucia when the Sam Lucia blacks were coming out of our factory. And we still had those bales in the pocket. So fast forward, that ended up becoming blend number 10, which then really solidified and finalized the Sangre Nueva blend. If it wasn't for that little sliver of Kentucky Fire Cured to be tossed in there, if I didn't ask for that experimental, I don't think we ever would have come across the cigar gel, to be completely honest with you.
Yeah, and it's funny because not every place that will, retail the Sangre Nueva necessarily list Kentucky Fire Cured as one of the filler ingredients in the blend. Some do,
Yes,
some don't, and it's been kind of inconsistent depending on the retailer. But I was really intrigued, and I found out, there's Kentucky Fire Cured, because I found out about that after I smoked it the first time for a review for the channel. The cigar, when I first had it, there was something very uniquely delicious about it, and I think it was because of that Kentucky Fire Cured in there. Just that little sliver was so potent enough to give it just the right layer of smokiness without overwhelming the rest of the tobaccos in that blend, which I thoroughly appreciate, that sort of finesse in cigar blending. So that's really awesome.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you. It was very interesting to play with. Something I don't mention very often either is two of the blends that came after, I should say, blend number 10 also carried Kentucky Fire Cured. But that's when we really started playing with those percentages. And that's when it kind of slaps you in the face, really. You get to those higher numbers, so like your 10%, your 15%, and that's all you could taste about the cigar, brother. And Cameroon is one of those where, because it's such a thick leaf, it's hard to mask that flavor and in terms of what that gives you. So it was very, very tedious to play with, for lack thereof of a term, but it was a lot of fun, and I'm glad we ended up doing what we did at our factory to get just that tiniest sliver. And we really mean it. It is the smallest sliver of Kentucky Fire Cured, nothing more, nothing less. If it wasn't for that literal,
I imagine it would be.
What was that? I'm sorry.
I'd imagine it would be a kind of a delicate balance to tread, because you have to teach your rollers to put just the right amount in each time to get the consistency that you want. So I could easily, if the sliver does that much, just a little bit more, throw the whole cigar off. So the fact you continue to put this out and it's still as good as it is impressive. To move on a little bit to talking about, it was like, you kind of touched on this a little bit, what it was like growing up in a cigar making company and a family that makes cigars. I think it's really encouraging that your father was the one that really kind of pushed you over the edge to start making your own cigars for the family name, which is really cool. I'm a second generation business owner myself, so it's really a gratifying experience when the prior generation kind of pushes you forward. They're not holding anything back. They want you to proving. How early did you realize, this is what I want? I want to get into the family business, and I want to continue this family heritage of mine.
So a lot of people don't know this either, so this is actually going to be very fun to talk about. I didn't always want to be a part of the industry, mostly just due to the fact that, for me, on the outside in, especially being what you can consider at that time a newer smoker when I was very inexperienced, it was intimidating as all hell for me. I did not know where I would fit, per se, because I didn't know anybody within my age category at that time trying to do what I was doing. And because of which, I remember I wanted to do all sorts of different things. I jumped into accounting in relation to college. Ended up finishing up with a major in marketing. Now I'm jumping into the LSAT, and I'm studying for that to hopefully get into law school. So all that is essentially to say I started really getting my hands dirty, for lack of a better term, at the factory more or less at around 7 years old. We would frequently visit our factory during the summer. Yeah. A very, very young age. I was not smoking cigars in the slightest, but I was packaging a hell of a lot of cigars. I would get there from 5 in the morning. And if I remember correctly, I would leave more or less at around 3 in the afternoon or so. That's when I would just tire out.
Wow.
Yeah. And all the
It's a long
child
day.
labor, it was insane, brother. I got to be completely frank with you. Thinking about it now, it's something that at that time I didn't fully understand, and yet the appreciation really, really showed, specifically with my grandfather and my father, who would always give me a kiss on the forehead and say, dude, thank you so much for just helping us out. I know you don't know what you're doing right now, but you're tremendous. Your extra hands just takes us a very long way. And since then, we've also increased our factory size. So a lot's happened since then. So anyway, fast forward about 15, when I was 15 years old, we're having a little New Year's Eve party, and I finally get to smoke my very first cigar, which was our Casa Cuevas Maduro prototype. This was before the launch. So this was 2016, which was our soft launch, and 2017 in April is when we did launch. So from there, I was getting a little more into the know-how about the cigars in the factory as well, but I started working at a retail shop, Neptune Cigars, particularly. I was there for close to about a year, and they were the ones, to be completely honest, that really expanded my palate. I was smoking just about everything that they carried on their shelves, from all the monocrystal white vitolas you could think of to some of the more limited edition stuff. And, you know, fast forward, I was still studying. I finished up with that. I jumped full on time now with my father. And I've kind of always had my hands full up until this point, but the amount of love that I've received from this industry as a whole, especially being so young, is not something that I personally don't take into consideration every day. I mean, it's incredible. I would not be here if it wasn't not only for my father, but for the people in this industry and individuals such as yourselves, including the consumers watching. Yeah. You guys have educated me through and through, not just my father or my grandfather. There's a lot of stuff about cigars. And what I like to say is there's always something new to learn. But it really, truth be told, if it wasn't for those conversations, I wouldn't really be where I am today.
Yeah, it is. Even as a consumer, it's an amazing process when you find out just how deep the levels of knowledge and information you can find out. There's always something new to learn, even as a consumer, even if you're not in the industry proper. There's so much to learn about this particular business and the product that they're producing, because tobacco is such a rich fruit of the earth. It's something that always surprises me, and blends like this are kind of what gets me excited, because it's like, here we go, someone else is doing something new that no one else has done just yet, and I love seeing the innovation. So do you have a favorite blend in the Casa Cuevas lineup, or even outside the lineup? Is there cigars that you really, really like that you find yourself keep coming back to? Obviously this one, because I keep coming back to it, but let's talk about some of the stuff that you like the most.
I've said this time and time again. I'm a huge, huge sucker for the Rose of Sharon by Southern Draw. That is a tremendous medium plus Connecticut. I find myself gravitating to that cigar almost on a weekly basis at this point. I was just at a local shop today, and I picked one up. Go figure. So I'll be completely just transparent here, and this goes for all manufacturers and all brand owners as alike. I feel as if being a brand owner, you get tired of smoking your own stuff, so you're bound to venture out and smoke other cigars, because there's a lot of damn good cigars out there, folks. I mean, we don't just smoke what we like. And if I were to go down the bias route, yes, I love this blend in particular, Joe. This has become my morning smoke, truth be told. I'll smoke a Sangre Nueva if I can every morning. But beyond that, if we were to talk about a very unbiased note, I will say our Reserva Natural Connecticut is a tremendous, good everyday morning smoke. It works amazing with coffee, on top of which to boot. I'd say that one's a huge ringer for me. Our Patrimonio, which was our first time ever using Honduran Corojo. That's something else that is our first ever medium plus cigar. I'm reluctant to say that it's on the fuller bodied side of things. It kicks my ass personally. But that being said, I know there's a lot of people that would agree it's not the strongest cigar in the world. So we like to make very well balanced products. But in terms of cigars that can come up to the top of my mind that aren't ours, Rosa Sharon definitely takes one of those. It takes the cake. I'd say the Huehuense, if you haven't tried that, their Maduro version is incredible. Just about anything Tatuaje makes, I'm a big fan of.
Oh,
I mean,
yes.
I can go on here, brother.
You sound like you have a fairly similar palate to mine in regards to what you gravitate towards. So that's encouraging for me.
It's always a good sign.
When you were first getting into the idea of cigars into the industry, when you first thought about it, one of the things you were hesitant about was that you didn't see people in your age group doing something like this. I'm starting to see, I don't know if you're seeing the same thing, but I'm starting to see a more younger people just on the consumer end, but on the business end, starting to get into cigars and making some big waves. I mean, just to name one, Kyle Gellis of Warp Cigars, very young, and made a huge impact on the cigar industry, particularly in the boutique.
I lost you there for a bit, brother. I'm sorry. I didn't catch that last little second there.
I was just saying more people, more younger people getting into cigars, not just on the consumer end, but on the business end as well.
Oh yes, you see that a heck of a lot more, especially within these past, I want to say 2 years. In fact, no, I'd even go as far as to say after COVID, which is interesting. So I feel as if COVID was a big scary point for a lot of people, specifically in the industry, because this is a luxury, not a necessity. And yet more and more individuals were smoking cigars.
Right.
More fathers were smoking with their sons and so forth. So I have been seeing a lot more people my age, around that mid-20s group, more or less, coming into cigars, no longer being as intimidated by it. And that's just tremendous. I love to see it. And on the industry side of things, to see them coming up into the fray. I remember last year, PCA, a lot more folks my age were coming out with their own particular blends. And I was giddy to boot. I mean, that was incredible. So yeah, more than ever before, I'd say that the younger audience, so to speak, younger in quotations, because I mean, not really super young, but anyway, are jumping into this and finally getting to experience this culture, this aspect of things, which is incredible.
Yeah, and that's something that I think the general public at large is largely ignorant about in regards to the cigar culture, is just how family oriented the industry is, because there's so much family lineage, heritage, passing the baton to the next generation, and it happened time. And in my opinion, the best cigar companies are the ones that have that family aspect in it, where it's a generational structure as opposed to a corporate structure. And with you being a fifth generation one, I mean, that's got to be particularly resonant with you, I would imagine.
Yes, sir. Oh, 100%, Joe. I feel as if there's a lot of which I guess it's cliche to say that cigars are made with that love and that passion, but no, I mean, it really is made with that. This is something that my family's been doing for a hell of a long time. And if we didn't love the living crap out of what we do, we would not be doing it today. I mean, they've between that and between all the education that my grandfather received from his great-grandfather that I'm able to hear then from him, or things that my father knows, in particular, working as a manufacturer before a brand owner. So he got to learn a lot of those ropes early on as well. Little things like that go a very, very long way, because me coming into it, though I've been doing this now for all of essentially 4 years, realistically, that doesn't mean I know all the ins and outs about this industry, let alone the blending process, how our factory operates, who the individuals are, which is something else I feel as if is kind of shied upon. The people that are actually rolling your cigars, they are amazing, compassionate individuals. And to see them on a daily basis, to ask how they're doing, how their family's doing, I mean, it's a hell of an experience. And all of that comes with a lot of love. Yeah. So that's something else you don't find very, very often in other industries, but in the cigar industry, it runs very deep.
Yeah. So another trend at least in the consumer side of things, is I see a lot more consumers sort of hungry for more knowledge in regards to what they're smoking. Like, they really want to know the details about the different varietals that are being used in the blend. And I appreciate the fact that Casa Cuevas tends to be pretty thorough in their outlining of what tobaccos I mean, within reason. Obviously, they're not going to give everybody the specifics all the time, but people tend to be hungrier now than they ever were in the past, as far as I can tell. I think in the past, it was the older demographics seemed to be more of a brand loyalty sort of group. Newer smokers, the late 20s, early 30s, even into the late 30s, early 40s, they're more and more people are gravitating to the boutique cigar arena as opposed to the legacy brands. And they are really insistent. They want to hear a story behind the blends. They want to hear a story behind the family making the blends, and they want to know as much detail as possible about the blends themselves, to just educate their palate and educate themselves just in general about the cigar world. And do you see that as something that's becoming more relevant in the market today?
Yes, and I find that also to be something that's very important. Cigars are a lot more than just 100% pure leaf that we're smoking. They tend to come with a big story. All our cigars, for example, all carry their own tethered story. Sangre Nueva, for example, even so much as the band coloration, which was just by chance, all of it does carry a name. Sangre Nueva, which stands for new blood, was that title that I was called throughout this entire time that I've been working with my father. You can look at other cigars that carry similar notions in terms of stories. And those stories are really what make the cigar, because if that didn't occur, or if there wasn't a story to back it up, then you're essentially just pumping out a cigar that doesn't carry any passion, any love. It's just another run-of-the-mill blend.
Right.
So seeing that come more into the forefront now, where consumers are genuinely excited to hear about the brands, to hear about the cigar themselves, to hear about the culture aspect of things in relation to my family lineage and things of that nature. I mean, it's incredible. And I can go for hours talking about that sort of stuff.
So I do have a question for one of the people who are watching on the live stream. Ed asks, what are the top 5 cigars that you would buy for yourself? I know we kind of touched on this a little bit, but kind of puts you on the spot a little bit. Well, do your best. What if you were to pick out 5 right now? What would be a good sampler for yourself right now?
So one of them to boot, of course, is that Rosa Sharon, hands down. I would say I gravitate a lot to the Lennox by LFD. I find that to be a tremendous cigar. Wow. There's a specific cigar, and it was made by 3 particular manufacturers, Montecristo being one of them. It's called La Ciudad de Música. And this cigar in particular is one that I have not found in a lot of locations, at least here down in South Florida. But I do know it's out there, and I will always, if I see it in a shop, I will go out of my way to get that damn cigar. It is so good. Nice, medium-bodied, very rich, almost kind of leathery notes in nature, very earthy. So that's one. The Huehuense is up there too. But I'd beg to even say, as of right now, I've been smoking a lot of AJ. That El Dorado does tremendous. I'd probably sub that one out for a Huehuense right now in terms of my top 5. And the last one, wow. Yeah. That's the tricky part, is really nailing down your top 5. The last one, I'd have to say, oh my gosh, that I could think of, man. There's so many damn good cigars. I'd say the Enclave, in all honesty, by AJ as well. The Enclave also comes to mind. Mostly, to be completely honest here and to level with you guys, mostly because I smoked it all of like a week ago, but it's also just a tremendous blend.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes. It is amazing to me because oftentimes the cigars that I think of the most do happen to be the ones that I have smoked most recently, because of those are the ones that are most fresh in my mind. I'm like you. It's really hard to pick a top 5 because my top 5 will change every week, it seems like. So it's hard to have a standard top 5 for sure. So in regards to just some more fun sort of questions here. Beverage, you're smoking a cigar. I know it's going to vary depending on what you're smoking and what time of day it's going to be. But what beverage do you find yourself going to more often than not when you light up?
So if I'm at a particular restaurant, let's say full bar and everything else, I'd possibly go on ahead, sit down, order myself an old fashioned, but with Four Roses bourbon. This will vary from cigar to cigar in relation to what that really works with, but I feel as if that sweetness with just a tad bit of bitterness really brings out and complements some of the best in the majority of the cigars that you will smoke. I wouldn't say Connecticut's per se, but if you're a fan of like a little bit of an extra spice kick, so let's say a Habano, then that could work very well with it because of the bitterness of, you know, the orange and whatnot. Or if you're a fan of that more creamy, darker, sort of Maduro-esque, you know, blend profile, then the old fashioned would work for that as well. I'd say if it was an open bar, I'd go with a Coke Zero. I'm nice and simple. It cleanses your palate. I don't know if it's the fizz in particular, but I do know it will clean your palate, and it just goes well with just about everything personally.
Yeah, and here's a practice, and I've got this from a number of people before. When you're blending cigars and you're going through probably multiple blends in a, I don't see any other way around that.
Yeah.
That, honestly. In that situation, what are some of the things that you usually keep your fresh so you're actually tasting authentically what it is that you're trying to figure out you like?
So there's a few things that come to mind here. I'd say the always go-tos would be your Coca-Cola or would be your coffee. Coffee doesn't really cleanse your palate, so to speak, especially when you've been smoking a hell of a lot of cigars. I'd say it just adds a lot to this underlying flavor that you could bring out in your cigar. Think of it as a primer. I think that's a better way to put it.
Right.
But one that always catches people off guard that I just learned of recently, and I've been doing it ever since, butterscotch. Butterscotch candies are amazing when it comes to cleaning your palate, interestingly enough, out of all things. And I'm a sweet tooth for one, but I mean, it's just, it does extremely well. And you just let it sit, you let it melt, and it kind of encompasses literally your entire tongue, cleans it out entirely, and just kind of makes that smokiness, for lack of a better term, almost obsolete. So that way you have that fresh palate and you're able to smoke something else. You could also find a lot of contrast in cigars with that butterscotch in particular, which is something that I feel as if not a lot of people really go for. Because having your comparison, or better said, having something that complements a cigar is almost a go-to. Everybody does it. But having something that contrasts it, that allows you to see some of the more sharper tones in your blend, is also very, very important. And that butterscotch has that bit of both, where you can play around and have either a very stark contrast in terms of a certain profile that you're going for, or something that very well complements it. Like it works very well with Sangre Nueva, but it wouldn't work as well with our Habano.
Very cool. That's a very sound piece of advice. I've never actually tried that. Now I'm going to start getting some butterscotch candies and start doing that between us. Ever get to the point. Let's see. So let's talk about any future projects in regards to Casa Cuevas. Anything in the pike up too much? Are you working on anything for the next couple of years to?
Yes. Very, very excited too. The first one, it's either going to be launching this year if we really finalize it. It's been something we've been working on for a while, and it's we have this cigar called the Sledgehammer de Mandaria in Spanish, which is all based on a true story. But to give you Reader's Digest, essentially our warehouse operation was broken into, and all the cigars were wiped out back in 2019. Some limited edition cigars were taken alongside that batch, so because of which we had to kind of lick our wounds and come up with something new for the trade show, hence the Sledgehammer, which is the spiciest cigar that we carry in our line. For the longest time, we wanted to give it a counterpart, and we wanted it to be with Mata Fina, specifically as a wrapper. The catch is, it's almost damn near impossible to find anything Brazilian, at least consistently, so we've been pushing this project now, I want to say, for about 2 years or so, give or take. However, now we're actually pushing it out. We found a viable substitute, and we'll see where it goes with that. The one that I'm more excited about is further down the line. It's going to be another year from now that I have the privilege of working on, which I'm very excited about. But it's coined 1881. That's all I can give in terms of the blend process right now. I will say, though, this is going to be a very, very traditional blend, something that was crafted by my great-grandfather, somebody who didn't own a factory but was simply just a farmer by trade working the fields. And my grandfather tried to replicate it, named it after my sister's nickname, which she always calls her Chabelina, and those are one of the very first cigars we launched at our factory, just for personal smokes. However, tweaking that blend to the exact regimen as to what my great-grandfather envisioned is now the bigger project that I have going forward. And I got to be completely honest with you, Joe. I'm beyond excited and a little bit nervous as well.
That's probably a good thing, to have a little nervousness in there. Yeah, I'm confident it's fine. We do have another question from one of the viewers. Let's see. The Vintage Cigar asks, to any of us, which cigar would you recommend to start with?
So I would say, especially if I'm assuming you're an experienced smoker, otherwise known as the vintage cigar. So I know you've probably been around the block. That being said, I would recommend our core line Maduro. It's a great way to start. A nice medium-bodied smoke, very well balanced. Carries a Mexican San Andres wrapper on top also, so it has this little semi-sweetness playing along with it, and it just works tremendous with coffee. I find that, or that used to be better said, my morning smoke. I'd say a step above that would be our Patrimonio in particular. Our Patrimonio just really brought something new to the table. First time using that Corojo from Honduras, as well as our first time ever using Peruvian filler. So you're going to pick up a little bit of this tang in that first third that really kind of sets, I guess, the bar as to where that cigar is going to sit for you. So I'd say those two. But if you're a fan of a damn good Connecticut, I am a sucker, like I said, for our Reserva Natural. Our Reserva Natural is nice and smooth, Ecuadorian Connecticut wrapper. You're going to pick up some sweet tones. More so than you would in our regular core line, just because of some added Colombian filler that we put inside percentage-wise. And it has just a little bit more Pennsylvania broadleaf too, so you're going to get a little more oomph with your cigar. I'd still say it's a mild to medium smoke, very much on the low end of the medium, truth be told, but that is also a very, very smooth, very delectable cigar that would really open up your range in relation to what we got. Most of what we blend is very full in flavor rather than full in strength. We prefer that well balanced than we do something that'll kick you in the chest, so to speak.
Right, for sure. On that one. So good answer. Hope that helps you out, Vintage Cigar. You mentioned using blends. I mean, that is a region that, in my opinion, hasn't been tapped into a whole lot in the grand scheme of things in the industry, but I'm seeing more and more of it. Is there a region that's growing tobacco that you find gets you more excited about what they're producing? I mean, is it Peru, or I mean, is it stuff in Pennsylvania and Florida sun-grown? I mean, what sort of regions are getting you excited about what they're producing now?
You know what? Interestingly enough, and I would always kind of guide people in this direction, I'd say Ecuadorian. And Ecuadorian's one of those that it's been around for a very, very long time. Ecuadorian leaf is just very rich. But what we've come to see, at least from I guess, not to get nerdy with you guys, but a very statistical standpoint, is that you can bring just about any sort of seed over there in Ecuador and grow it and have something in terms of similar tasting or damn near close. So it's become the chameleon of this industry. A lot of the stuff that we do get, for example, Ecuadorian Cameroon. Yeah, it's extremely interesting. We can't find African Cameroon anywhere, but Ecuadorian Cameroon stands a testament and tastes very, very, very similar. There are going to be some differences in terms of nuance, but that being said, anything that comes out of Ecuador to me is amazing. Nicaragua's king, of course. I would say I'd love to see more of Burmese. I recently had the opportunity to smoke a full-on Burmese tobacco, interestingly enough. Now,
interesting.
Yes, I'd say as a whole, as wrapper, binder, and filler, it didn't necessarily work, at least not for my personal palate. But I will say it had a lot of room to play with in relation to wrapper and binder. Like, holy hell, it had a lot of flavor in relation to those two things. So I'd love to see a lot more of that down the line, but only time will tell. I mean, truth be told, it seems like we're still going to have that Honduran, Ecuadorian, Nicaraguan, and Dominican going down the line all the way through.
Yeah. Now, I recently did an article on Cigar Public talking about limited release and annual release. They seem to be getting a lot of traction. There's been a few companies that Crown Heads in particular, they're really good at the annual releases, and they get people excited every time Las Calaveras comes out. They always do something new several times a year that everyone understands. This is basically a one-off. We're doing it one time this year, and this is what it is. We'll do the same project next year, but it's going to be always different. Do you have any inclination of doing any sort of limited run or annual release in the portfolio sometime?
Yes, we do. So we have one that's currently ongoing as it stands. This goes back to those limited edition cigars that were stolen back in 2019. These were called Flacos, and these Flacos were 7x43 Lanceros. They were 500 count back in the day. Yes, they were called Flaco after me because I'm as skinny as all can get. That being said, but they were our first time ever launching anything limited, and the unfortunate story of having them kind of all taken. We couldn't replicate them in good conscience just because we didn't know if a certain consumer wanted a specific box as they were numbered, but they came out of sequence. We had no clue if they were at the shop itself or if they were stolen. So we didn't want you guys waiting essentially half a year for this product. So we just kind of let it go by the wayside. But fast forward, and I mean really fast forward, I'm saying years from that point, a lot of individuals would show up, whether a local event or events out of the state in terms of Florida, with those cigars and be like, listen, I still have a few sitting in my humidor. They're tremendous. It became this mythical unicorn for our brand. So we decided to launch again in 2021, the Flacos once again, and we decided that they would be coming out once every 4 years. So the next batch should be coming out 2026 at this point, if not a little bit sooner, if I'm not mistaken, actually. 2024, pardon me. So yeah, that's something that we have in the works, really excited about. And as of right now, at least through the grapevine, you guys might be some of the very first to hear this. We're doing some tweaking here and there.
All right, here we go. Exclusive.
And that being said, possibly toying with the addition of adding a Habano to our Reserva line, maybe some new Vitolas, because Corona definitely fits that bill, and it's something we've been asked for a good portion of time. So I guess I'll leave it at that for now, but what I will say is there will be some more limited edition stuff coming out down the line beyond just the Flacos, so keep your eye on it.
Right on. All right. All right, so we're just about soon. I want to thank you again for taking the time to join us here on the channel. It's been a really very informative and very interesting interview. Information, and I love the enthusiasm that you're bringing to the table.
Thank you.
Let's see. No problem at all. I'm hoping to be at PCA this coming July.
Okay.
So any plans to be at PCA in Vegas this time around?
Possibly, yes. So this is something that me and my father have gone back and forth with in relation to this year, just because we don't. The best part, let me backtrack this. The best part about having the factory is, yes, we can go on ahead and oversaturate the market with a bunch of different blends, but we like to make sure our blends, first and foremost, stand alone. And secondly to that, we make sure that they're done right. So we don't want to rush anything. And when PCA comes around the corner, that's going to be the first thing asked. We want to make sure we have something ready and that we're able to give to that consumer basis when the time comes. So at this point in time, I'd say it's 50-50, but more inclined to go really than not. So chances are, yes, we will be going to PCA.
Right. Very cool. So my editor on Cigar Public, Danny Crook, he mentioned that he ran into you a little bit at TPE. He wanted me to give you a shout out and say hi to him. Yeah, he was fairly excited when he was to be interviewing you. So I was like, oh yeah, I'm looking forward to it myself. So for everybody who is watching, anybody who has commented today, entered to win a 5-pack sampler of Cuevas cigars. It will include one of these, the Sangre Nueva, in that 5-pack, along with some other. I haven't had a bad one yet. They've all been really good, and I'm very much looking forward to going through the entire catalog systematically and just delving into what you guys do. Where is your factory located?
So our factory is located in the Dominican Republic, in Santiago, in this little duty-free zone area. our factory has always kind of been over there. We've been manufacturing, I want to say, with the inclusion of this year, 43 years over there now. So hell of a long time.
Wow. Yeah.
Oh yeah, a good amount of time.
Very cool. Well, Alec, I very much appreciate you taking the time again. Appreciate it. All the best to you and your family. Very interested in watching you guys grow and watching Casa Cuevas continue to bring out great stuff for us, the consumer. It is also really fun to see factories and companies like yours that basically started out, more or less started out making cigars for other people, and then you eventually started making stuff for your own family name. Is that correct?
Yep, very, very true. And that was just the way it worked. I mean, my father always wanted a brand. He just didn't really know where to begin, and he's very, very happy that we're where we are today, truth be told. So, and I'm sure my grandfather is too.
Very nice. Well, Alec, let you go. Where can people go to find out about Casa Cuevas and your guys' company?
You can go to casacuevascigars.com if you'd like to know a little bit more about us. We're currently actually revamping our website as we speak. If you want to learn a little bit more information or just see what we do at the factory, you can follow us over at Casa Cuevas Cigars on Instagram as well as on Facebook. And of course, should you have any questions in relation to our products or just interested in just seeing the next time we're walking through a shop, please message through and we'll get back to you as soon as we can.
Good stuff. Well, thank you again, Alec. Hope you have a great rest of your week. Appreciate you having the interview with us, and we'll see you guys on the next interview whenever we schedule one. And keep me posted whenever something new is coming down the pike. I like to stay abreast of new things as they come out.
You got it, Joe. Thank you so much for having me on.
Much love, bro. Thank you, everybody, joining us for this interview. Thank you again to Alec Cuevas for taking the time. Really enjoyed that conversation, and be on the lookout in the next couple of days announcing the winner for this drawing. One lucky viewer who commented today will be getting a 5 of Casa Cigars. So be on the lookout. I will be posting that in the section on the Jono Cigar channel. And so just keep an eye open for that because I will need to get information from you from where to send that. Hope you guys have a great week. Thank you again for joining me. Till next time, everybody, smoke a good one.